Hey folks, I'm Aaron from Finkton Languages, and as most of you can probably see, I am about 7 years younger than I was last time I did a live stream last week. But anyways, I'm real excited to get talking to you guys. I have a live stream that's a little bit more planned than usual because I have been preparing a lecture I'm going to do for our school here. I'm going to do a school presentation on linguistics pretty soon. So with that said, I figured I would get some practice in and do my presentation with you guys about language, how language evolves, what is a dialect and how do they go around changing. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that we have to say about linguistics. As usual, I would love to hear from you guys. So if you have questions, if you have any input that you want to add to the lecture, let me know. Because that's why I do these live streams, is to hear from you all. And with that said, I'm gonna get started here. Actually, before we get started with the presentation, I want to, oops, am I sharing my screen here? All right, before we get started with the presentation, I just want to say, if you're joining for the first time, I'm glad to have you here. And I always like to ask where you're from, what language you speak, and what languages you're learning, because that starts to spark a little bit more conversation in the comments, which is what I'm always looking for. Jem says, "Ooh, we're just teaching this and I was so confused. So glad you're doing this." Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I am preparing a presentation for a school, middle school, I think. And so I'm going to get some practice in doing my little presentation. Before we get started with that, though, I just want to how do I do this? Say a big shout out to those who have supported me on Patreon. If you're interested in this conversation that we're having and joining some more discussion, I do have different Patreon tiers that will allow you to participate in different levels of, just our community here on Patreon. So that's things like being able to get involved in the discussion groups. And then we have like monthly group chats that are live, as well as things like private lessons, coaching and linguistics, things like that. So if any of this is interesting to you, go ahead and check out my Patreon and see what different benefits I offer on there. So I want to say a big shout out to Hillary, Nathan, Mark, Ian, Susan, Taylor, JP, Brendan, Ryan, and Joel Trast for your past and continued support. All right, anyways, let's get into this linguistics presentation that I have here. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about dialects and language evolution. As most of you know, I like to talk about language. Here is what looks to be I believe this is a Thai dictionary. And before we do anything in talking about languages, we have to sort of talk about what a language is. And you might think that's pretty easy to know, right? Like, we know what a language is. We use language every day. We know what the word means, but the problem is you start to get into certain gray areas, and it's not always immediately obvious what is or isn't a language. And there's some factors that can be really confusing. Let me see. I know I'm probably missing a bunch of comments here. What was your license project about? I'm not sure. Greeting. Wow, we got a lot of comments. Sorry, you guys. I won't be able to answer all of these while I'm doing the presentation, but I will try to answer them here coming up. Okay, so anyways, there's a lot of aspects of language that are not really easy to categorize and not easy to talk about cleanly. So it gets a little bit messy, even though we typically tend to think that we always know exactly what a language is. Okay, and one of the things that makes it a little bit messy is that language is always changing. Okay, so none of us speak the same way that our grandparents used to speak, right? Or our great grandparents, right? I speak a little bit different from my parents, and they speak a little bit different from their parents, and they speak a little bit different from how their parents spoke when they were alive, right? And you keep going back until you get to Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare speaks very differently than we speak today in English. And then just a few centuries before that, they spoke what was called Anglo-Saxon, and that language was very different, like extremely different. In fact, Old English was so different from modern English that you wouldn't have been able to understand what they were saying. If you've ever tried to read Beowulf or anything like that in the original Old English, you know that. So there's some things that people say differently now than our grandparents used to say. And one example of this is if you've ever had a texting conversation with your grandparents, there's this new phenomenon now where probably some people in my generation and older, we will text things like K. All right. And when we text the letter K, what that means is okay. Right? Like it means, all right, that's fine. Yeah, no problem. Sure. Great. Yeah, all right, that's fine. It's like an affirmation, right? It's a positive thing. And I do this, and I know a lot of people, especially older than me, who do this. But there's this new phenomenon that's been emerging, I don't know, the last 10, 20 years, something like that, with maybe the millennials and Gen Z, and I guess probably now Gen Alpha, who texting K is seen as rude. And what you're supposed to do is text something like this. Spell out the full word with an exclamation point and a bunch of emojis. And to a Gen Z person, this means the same thing as, you know, what an older generation person would have meant with just K, right? Whereas this is now seen as rude, and this is the standard for you know, a acquiescence or an acceptance of something, right? Not only does language change by age and by generation, but it also varies by geography. So you can see here, the United States is pretty starkly divided on what we refer to, like what word we use to refer to soft drinks or sweetened carbonated beverage, as they say here. Right. In the North, we mostly say pop, except for with the strong exceptions of the Milwaukee area and the St. Louis area. And then in the Northeast and in the West, they say soda, along with St. Louis and Milwaukee areas, and maybe bits of Florida. And then I always find it funny how in parts of the South, they say Coke, referring to any soft drink, right? Like you could ask for a Mountain Dew, and to them that's a Coke, or root beer is a Coke, or Sprite. I don't know. So I just think it's funny how language varies. It not only does it vary by age and by generation, so not only does it vary over time, it also varies over geography. Another funny one is this word Crayon, which I didn't realize until not too long ago. Some people actually pronounce this word with 2 syllables. In fact, it seems like most people pronounce it with 2 syllables. Most people say either crayon or crayon, which I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing those right, because I don't pronounce either of those words, crayon or crayon. If you look and see here in the northern part of Wisconsin, there's just this little green tint, which is how I pronounce the word crayon, as in rhymes with man, 1 syllable. And there's one other pronunciation on this chart, which just seems crazy to me. And I had never heard of this until just a few months ago, when I was having a conversation with my wife, and she said something along the lines of, remember when you were a child and you got the huge box that had like 100 crowns in it? And I was like, a huge box with 100 crowns? What are you talking about? I have no idea what this box with 100 crowns is, right? Because to me, a crown is something like this. That's a crown to me. She meant crayon, whatever. And apparently, in her part of Virginia where she grew up, it's common to pronounce this word as crown, which it's crazy to me, and I had never heard of, but I just think that's really funny. All right, I'm missing out on a lot of comments here, and I do apologize. Hey, Rasmus, thanks for joining. It's spelt crayon. Okay, yeah, I want to mention right now that is a misconception, like a huge misconception, right? A lot of times when people are debating pronunciation, you say, well, look, it's spelled crayon, so it should be pronounced crayon, right? Not crayon, not crown, not crayon. The mistake you're making there is you're assuming that pronunciation should be based off of spelling. All right. How do you pronounce the word Knight? Because I'm pretty sure you don't say knight, right? It's pronounced night, and spelling has absolutely nothing to do with it. How about the word salmon? What other words? Pneumonia, right? How about the word quinoa? For years, I pronounced that word as quinoa because that's how it's spelt, right? It's like Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother. He had only ever seen the word chameleon written, and he had not heard of it. He had not heard it spoken, so he pronounced it as chameleon, right? We just don't pronounce words the way they're spelt. So I reject your argument that it's spelt crayon and should be pronounced crayon. I say crayon because I'm from Wisconsin, which apparently, according to this map, Wisconsin is the only part of the United States that pronounces it as crayon. I was actually unaware of that. I thought crayon was just the standard pronunciation of the word up until not too long ago. All right, but this leads me to the difference between language, dialect, a dialect, and an idiolect, okay? Because we all know that there's dialectal differences in English, right? You have differences in which word you use to talk about soft drinks, okay? That's a dialectal difference, okay? My dialect, the Wisconsin dialect, is slightly different from the Louisiana dialect, where they mostly refer to soft drinks as Coke, okay? That's a dialectal difference, but no one would say I speak a different language from someone who lives in Louisiana. Okay, we just have different dialects. Well, it gets a little bit more confusing than that when you look at what they call dialect continuums or dialect continua. Okay, now I have a map here of Scandinavia in Northern Europe. Okay, and there's 3 different languages spoken in these 3 countries here. I don't know, for some reason Iceland. I mean, I guess Iceland is also a Scandinavian language. All right, but we have Denmark, we have Sweden, and we have Norway. All right, and my understanding, I don't speak any of these languages, but my understanding is that the only reason they're considered different languages is because they belong to different countries, but they're actually mutually intelligible, meaning people who speak these languages can understand each other speaking their own language. So it might be a little bit more different than the Wisconsin accent is to the Louisiana accent, but they're still able to understand each other. Okay, now there's an interesting phenomenon in this case because someone who lives in Denmark might be able to understand someone who speaks Norwegian, right? And someone who speaks Norwegian might be able to understand someone who speaks Swedish. And someone who speaks standard Swedish might be able to understand someone who speaks the Swedish, how would you call that? Finnish Swedish, or the Swedish that's spoken in Finland. But someone from Denmark cannot understand all of those people. Okay, just because there's a continuum of people who can all understand each other does not mean that everyone on the continuum can understand everyone else on the continuum. All right, so it gets a little bit muddy when we're determining what is a language, what is a dialect, and what is an idiolect. Okay, an idiolect is your own personal version of the language. But so should we call this one Scandinavian language that's spoken by all of the people in Scandinavia, other than, speakers of Finnish? Or should we call this various dialects, various languages with people who can just understand languages that are not their own? It's not entirely clear, and it seems like a very arbitrary line to draw right down the middle here when we know that these people can understand these people. Okay, just as it would be a very arbitrary line to say, well, people in the north speak different from the people in the south, so they speak different languages. Well, no, it's just not that easy, right? Because we can understand each other. And there's a good example that I can share with you guys, which is the Scots language, or potentially the Scots dialect. I think there's been some debate whether it's a language or a dialect of English. And there's a reason that this is a debate, and the reason is no one quite knows how to define the difference between a language and a dialect. But I'm going to just play you a short clip of this guy speaking the Scots language, as they call it in this video. They call it the Scots language. All right, but you'll notice right away the Scots language sounds an awful lot like English, just being spoken with a Scottish accent. Okay, so if you speak English, you'll be able to understand what this guy is saying. But then every once in a while, you'll start to lose what he's saying, and it does sound like he's speaking something entirely different, and you won't be able to understand what he's saying, even if you're a native English speaker, because it'll be just as different from English as German or Swedish or Chinese or Romanian or any other language. All right, so let's just take a look really briefly.
My name is Dr. David Hosbroch, Language and Information Officer at the Centre for the Scots Lead in Perth. I would like to speak about the Scots Lead and its Sibneshill historical spearings. Firstly, what is Scots? In modern Scotland, Scots is the name for the by-leads gathered together, and is kent by the other names of Doric, Lallans and Scotch for by. And going by where you bide, you might already better ken a mere hame about name.
All right, so, oops, I'm going to pause it there.
My name.
So, at first you can understand he says, hello, my name is Dr. David Horsbrook, and you can tell he's speaking with a Scottish accent, but you can mostly understand him. And then at some point in there, he just starts to speak something that just doesn't sound like English anymore.
This counter a branch of the Germanic family of Leeds, and is like its sister tongue Southron, sprung fae the Old Angles lead. Both Old Angles and its daughter Scots has been spoken in Southland and Easter Scotland, the Lowlands, for the 7th century AD. There are mentions of this lead to be found, for instance, in the runic carvings on the Ribble Cross in Dumfriesshire, bigot in the 8th century AD. Scots caithed an awe in Orkney and Shetland as early as the 14th century, and got to be the most spoken tongue.
And I'm gonna pause it there. So I'm gonna leave it to you guys. Why can't I close this? Let's close that out. All right, I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. Is Dr. David Hesworth speaking English with a Scottish accent, or is he speaking an entirely different language? Let's see, do we have any answers in here yet? Yeah, Jalam never knew. Vietnamese can understand Chinese to some extent. Yeah, I think that's true. Right, it's mutually intelligible. That's what we call it. Patrick says, I heard that Danish sounds like its words are being slurred and not fully pronounced compared to Swedish or Norwegian. Yeah, okay. Lucas Santos brings up a good point. Like Galician, Portuguese, and Spanish, where I don't speak Portuguese. I never learned Portuguese, but I can understand someone who is speaking Portuguese. Often. I can at least read Portuguese, even though I never studied it. All right. That's an example of mutual intelligibility. All right, let's keep going forward. And there's a few factors that also will complicate this question of how language works. First of all, how many words are in a language? All right. At first, it might seem like you should be able to figure this out pretty easily by just counting the words in the language, right? You just pull out the dictionary and you go through the dictionary and you count the words, right? Problem is, language is never as clear cut as a language is never as clear cut as that. For example, does the English language have the word pop and soda? Are these both words? Because some people who speak English never use the word soda. So can you really say that the word soda is a word in their dialect? So should you count that towards the English language as a whole? Would it count towards the English language in their dialect? I don't know. Is the word eating a word? I would say that's a word, right? Eating, like we know what that word means. How about the word eat? Eaten, eats, ate. Are these all words? So is eat, eating, ate, eats? Is that 4 words or is that 1 word with different endings? How about the word one? Is that a word? Well, yeah. We all understand that the word one is a word. How about 2? Yeah, that's a word. 3 is a word. 4, 5, 6. These are all words, right? How about 10? How about 11? How about 21? Is 21 a word? Well, I'd say 21 is probably a word. How about 100? Yeah, that's a word. 1,000, a million. How about 1,657,000? I don't know. I don't know if that's a word or not. It seems like a word to me. If 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 21, 100, 600, if those are all words, then 1,783,000 should also be a word, right? And even if you don't consider that to be a word, you have to consider 1 million to be a word. So million is a word, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, sextillion, septillion, octillion, right? And you can keep going with that indefinitely, I suppose. Are those all words? So if that's the case, then you would have to say that our language has an infinite amount of words because there's an infinite amount of numbers. How about the word corner? I bring this up just as an example of how words don't fall neatly into categories like we might think, especially if we're monolingual. This is just an exercise to show you how languages can compare strangely. All right, and the word in the English language, we have the word corner. We know what this word means, right? You can give me an example of a corner. You could look up the word corner in the dictionary and it would give you a definition of more or less what you expected a corner to be. But in the Spanish language, we have 2 words for corner, rincón and esquina. Both of these words mean corner, but they don't mean the same thing. Okay, these words have different meanings, even though they both mean corner. All right, a rincón is a corner, like maybe a corner in a room, an inside corner, a corner where you could put a chair, right? Go put that chair in the corner. Or you tell your child, go sit in the corner, right? An esquina is an outside corner, like the outside corner, like the corner of an intersection. You're going to go around the outside corner. They both mean corner, but they don't mean the same thing. All right, these words are not synonymous in Spanish. even though they both have the same meaning in English. There's also languages don't mash up very nicely. They're not easy to categorize in the way that we all understand what the word ate means, right? It means eat, but in the past tense. This word won't line up nicely, won't be easily translatable into every language, okay? I'm pretty sure every language, they probably have a word for eat. But not every language has a word for ate, okay? Because in this word ate, we have at least two different things. Two different bits of information. One word, it has to do with the word eat, and also it's in the past tense. Okay, why do those two needs to be linked together in one word? Right. For example, in the Thai language, they have a word that's gin. Gin means to eat. All right. But if you want to say I eat today, you would just say gin. Right. If you want to say I ate yesterday, you would still just say gin. All right. And you can tell me when the eating happened. You can say that I ate yesterday. You can say I ate a year ago. You can say I ate at a fancy restaurant last weekend. Okay. But if you're going to tell me when the eating happened, the only way to tell me that is just to tell me. It's not built into the language itself. And there's no reason that it has to be. It's just the strange quirk of the English language, and many others, granted, that we feel like we have to include that. Jack Elfrink says, my favorite word is the word snowable. If I say the weather today is snowable, you have never heard that word before, never learned it, and will likely never hear it again, but you know what it is. Yeah, and there's a lot of strange things like that. I was just watching a video yesterday on words that have only ever been used once. And I think, hold on, I have to look this up really quick. Quizzical. I think it was the word quizzacious. Yeah, okay. Quizzacious, meaning mocking or satirical. Actually, I don't remember if that was the word or not, but I remember watching a video on this just yesterday. They were talking about quizzacious is a word that has a definition, but it's only been used once in any book or anything. And I suppose it's probably now been used a lot more often now because people have been talking about how quizzacious has only been used once. Yeah, deriving from the word quiz as in to mock, mocking or satirical. Let me look up this video I was watching so I can share it with you guys rather than just. I think it was about the by Vsauce. Here's the video.
Hey, Vsauce.
Okay, let me just share this link in there. This is a really interesting video, actually. It has to do with word frequency and how words, how often certain words get used.
Hey, Vsauce. Michael here. About 6% of everything you say, Michael here, read and write.
Where is this audio coming from?
The is the most used word in the English language. About 1 out of every 16
I don't know
words we
why my
encounter
computer
on a
is playing
daily
this.
basis is the. The top 20 most common English words in order are the of and to. A in is I.
This is awkward. I don't know why my computer is still playing this video.
Have, but be they. That's a fun fact. A piece of trivia.
I'm going to turn down my volume so you guys can't hear it. Where is this audio coming from? I'm not that tech savvy, I guess. I only have one window open. It's not coming from there. It's not coming from there. It's not coming from there. Not there. Okay, I don't know. I don't know where this audio is coming from. But anyways, it's a really interesting video about how some words, I'll let you guys watch it if you're interested. But there's a number of words that, yeah, no, Lucas says, now your live stream is his. Yeah, exactly. My live stream has been hacked by Michael from Vsauce. You know, they have what's called corpus linguistics, and you know, you look at a corpus of words, a corpus of language. Hey, Peggy, thanks for joining. And you look at all the words in the language, or all the words in a certain corpus of text, right? For example, you could look at the Bible or the works of Shakespeare, or I don't know, 100 conversations recorded by random people. A corpus could be anything, but you want to have a big sample of language, a big sample of people speaking or writing. Peggy says, you just said hi to my mom. Hi, Peggy's mom. And even, you know, what if you have a big enough corpus, you're going to run into certain words that get used only once. And you're going to find certain words in you know, all of the works of a language that only get used one time, that you can only have a record of them being used one time in the entire language. Quizzacious is one of those words, or at least it was. I don't know if it is anymore. You know, when you have some ancient languages like Sanskrit or ancient Greek or Latin, and you have a finite number of works in those language, and then you're reading through a Latin text, and you come across a word that's only been used one time in that text, and there's no other existing Latin text or manuscript that has that word in it. How do you know what that word means? You have no reference for that word. We don't have any native speakers of Latin left anymore. You know, if we had 15 instances of this word, then we would be able to look at how it was used in all the other instances and be able to sort of figure out what the word means. But there's only one instance of the word. So how do you know what the word means? Well, you can try to guess off of the context of that one situation, off the one context of the one place where you found that word, but otherwise it's going to be pretty difficult. And so that's just what the video is about. Rare Chinese characters. Yeah, exactly. That would be like the same thing. All right. Well, anyways, I'm going to have to leave here pretty soon to start getting ready for this presentation I'm going to do for this school. So anyways, thanks to those who joined. I hope the lecture was interesting. And I hope you guys learned some stuff. And like I said before, if you're interested in you know, joining more of the conversation and getting some more in-depth look into the language learning community, you can check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/fingtam for access to different you know, discussion groups and monthly live video chats and things like that, and private lessons if you're so inclined. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.